Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Whiskey Wednesday night here on the Mash and Drum Whiskey Room. I am Jason C. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Hope everyone's had a great week. I had a really busy but amazing week and weekend, I should say. More of a weekend. You guys heard about the trip to MGP, but had probably even a more special event happen over the last weekend. So we'll get to that. And then we'll get into our very special guest tonight, Abandoned Bourbon. Brian from Abandoned Bourbon is here. He is backstage right now, and can't wait to bring him on. Super great palate. Love his channel. He also has a lot of whiskey nerd knowledge like I do, which I love. So really excited. It's the first time he's been on, so really cool to talk to him. And basically what we're going to do tonight is kind of go through the evolution of MGP. And not just MGP, the distillery, but MGP sourced brands, where they were, where they are now, the ones to get, the ones that are under the radar, because there's still so much out there. We felt like we should, we could kind of dedicate a whole show, get your guys' feedback on it, and figure out what some of those old bottles are. I have some OG ones right here, including this 10-year Boone County. Check this. This one's old school right here. Yep. I didn't even remember I had this bottle, one of the 1833 10-year MGP bottles. So I actually might crack that open again tonight. It's open. I just think maybe I took a sip or two out of it, but I think I tucked it behind to kind of keep it at bay, hide it from myself. Plus, a bunch of other just fun MGP stuff we're going to talk about and, really kind of go through exactly what makes a good source brand, what kind of keeps us away from a source brand if it does come from MGP. What are those positives? What are those negatives? And it'll just be a fun night, fun conversation. And we're going to drink some great whiskey. So what we're going to do here first is say hi to people in the chat. First, we have Michael Brown. Jason, I don't know if you have a bottle of Bare Knuckle 6-year, but that can go up against any other MGP bottle. I have had Bare Knuckle before, but I can't say I have a bottle of it. William Kavanaugh's in the house. Got to see him over the weekend. Mr. Mom is here. We got Joey B. It is a Whiskey Wednesday on the Mash and Drum. Aloha and cheers all from EJ. We got Mr. Mark Schwartz. How you doing? EMC Mash It Up. Or is it Ross and Squibb? Yeah, I'm just saying MGP. I'm not saying Ross. Well, I probably should start saying Ross and Squibb. I feel like it's permanent now. Tim, as always, looking gorgeous, is here. We got Ben Christmas. We got Ham Turkey. It's a great night for a live stream. Absolutely. Always a fan of Barrel King, and I know they use some MGP, correct? Yes, they do. Russ L. Cheers, everyone. Happy Whiskey Wednesday. Nathan Jurgensen is here. Some Manifest 10-year Manifest. Definitely some good MGP that's out there. Happy Whiskey Wednesday, everyone, from Andrew Bergstrom. We got Mr. Mom. Penelope Toasted Honey Barrel to go with tonight's topic. A-Brod is here. Michael Speakerman. Jeff Perkins. Bo's Wine Guy. We got Chris Meadows at Club Mead. Let's go, dram it. We got Josh Fritz in the house. What's up, Fritzy? We got Mike Meyer. We got Stacy from 4 Leaf Whiskey. How's it going, Stacy, my fellow Columbus alumni? Robert W. here. Cheers, all Rolling Fork rum tonight. Let's see. We got, Dr. Sped is here. Pouring some Wild Turkey 101 Rye since I haven't seen the 15-year yet. Oh, you're talking about the 15-year Russells, yep. AW, he's got 3 cheers for MGP there. We got Patrick Grelock is here. David Renstrom, good evening and cheers, everybody. Nice to see you as always. Grant is here. Stephen Walt says, match that like. Love it. JG is here. And a bunch of other people coming in. Liddy Casanova. What's going on, Liddy? Nice to see you. There he is. We out here. There's Brian Beyke from Abandoned Bourbon. We'll be bringing him on here in a little bit. Everyone's going MGP, MGB. And that's about it. Whiskey Mountains is here as well. We'll do a quick reminder for Whiskey Mountain's fundraiser for Alzheimer's here a little bit later. So stay tuned for that. Tommy D is here. Todd Ritter. What is going on? Tony Bag of Donuts. How you doing, man? Outside the Star and a bunch more. Okay, I'm catching up. I think I'm caught up here. Brian M says, I'm here. I should pour a little Presto. I actually have a little Presto over here, which I will be pouring a little bit later. One of my favorite MGP picks that we've done from National Barrel Company. And yeah, so over the weekend, I was honored to be I guess guest MC at the Barrels for Hope fundraising event. I don't know if you guys if you follow Barrels for Hope, you know it was started by 4 incredible people. We have Joe, who is one of the founding fathers of Barrels for Hope. But on top of that, you have Lance Lyell from Whiskey Tornado. You have Josh from Stuff and Whiskey, and also Dusty Dan. The 4 of them together created Barrels for Hope. William Kavanaugh, who's in the chat, he's a big help there. I think he's pretty much their treasurer or a big helping hand. And they had their first event, over the weekend to help celebrate all the money that they raised for Barrels for Hope this year, which was $40,000. So each charity got $10,000 each from that $40,000 that they had raised, which was amazing. I got to MC the event, do the intro, kind of introduce some people, and then close it out. Fred Minnick was there. He said some really nice words. Everybody got to learn a little bit more about Fred's story. But it was a really amazing night of giving. Tears were shed when you heard the stories from the different charities. We had Make-A-Wish, Folds of Honor, the American Cancer Society, and then I forgot the name of the mental health charity as well that Josh had chosen, which was amazing too. So hearing those stories, the room got really emotional, and on top of that, it was just an amazing night. Big thanks to Mark and Kim Schwartz. Kim Schwartz mainly for putting that entire event together. It was flawless. It was amazing. We went to Starlight the day before. I've never done a barrel pick with like 100 people. That was pretty unique to do. We did it kind of voting style, but it was To Ride on Her Arms. That was the name of it. Yes. So it was just an incredible weekend, and I can't say thanks to them enough for having me along and being a big part of it. So cheers to them. All right. So let's see. MGP. I'm not going to read that, Ken. Maureen Franchi is here. What's up, Fancy Franchi? All right. So before we bring my guest on, I just got a package delivered today. And this is pretty funny, guys, because I don't know if you heard about this, but Jack Daniel's just announced their new Distillery Series release, which is a twice barrel Tennessee straight rye whiskey. So I was like, didn't they do this already? Wasn't this part of this one, which was the Heritage twice barreled rye? There are some differences. We'll go through them a little bit, but I definitely wanted to try this because this is releasing soon. So I feel like, why not try this live real quick? I don't want to get into all the MGP beforehand or after. I said before I drink the Jack. You know what? And I am going to pour a little bit of the twice barreled rye to see if there's any differences here. So on the surface here, the mash bill is the same. You have your 70% rye mash bill that Jack Daniel's is known for. But then the big difference here is supposedly that the new Tennessee Tasters is, even though it's the same mash bill, the rye whiskey is it's aged in charred American white oak, but after maturation, the rye whiskey enters into a second new charred American oak white barrel for an additional 2.5 years. Now, when you compare that to the twice barreled rye special release, this one was 5.5 years in a first fill and 2.5 years in a second fill toasted oak barrel. So we have toasted oak, 2.5 years. This is a new charred oak barrel in the Tennessee Tasters for 2.5 years as well. So I'm just curious if there's any big differences here. So the Jack Daniel's Distillery Series rye, this this twice barreled one, it's going to sound strange, but I'm almost getting like a barbecue sauce note on it, like a tangy barbecue sauce. Big Vic, yeah, this is an old school Boone County bottle. Actually, let me throw the twice barreled Distillery Series. This is the new one from Jack coming out. That's going to be releasing soon. Just got the press release today and just got the box today. Now, the box was hilarious. I looked at the box and I'm looking at it and I'm trying to see who it's from. And I'm looking at the address and it goes, it says on top, so it has my address, but it says to Fred Minnick. So I guess I'm going to have to start wearing a friggin' ascot now. It's like to Fred Minnick, and then it has my address underneath that, which I thought was hilarious. I mean, I got to tell Fred that. All right. So yeah, so the twice barreled rye is actually a little bit, yeah, it's definitely smoky. I think when you do a brand new charred oak barrel, you're going to get a lot of that smoke in there, as opposed to a toast where it's pulling all those sweet sugars. Let me get a taste of this one, guys. Cheers. Let me know what you're drinking in the chat. So slight smoke on the palate, but it is sweet. That is some, oh man. And the proof on this is 107 versus the twice barreled rye, which is 100. So a little bit more of an uptick in proof on the Tennessee Taster. I keep calling them Tennessee Tasters. It's Jack Daniel's Distillery Select. See, the old school brain kicking in. Mash and Minnick, I like the ring of that. Hope you get Fred's mailed BTAC lineup too. Jerry Hernandez, that's what I was thinking, man. Send me all those Buffalo Trace samples that he gets, but I don't think Buffalo Trace is going to make that mistake. Yeah, I'm not really getting the barbecue so much on the palate. It's not really so much on the nose either. I think it was just that first smoky flavor I was getting, because you do get the barrel char, I feel like, as soon as it opens up, but that's pretty much dissipated. What's nice is like you get a nice hint of rye spice. You know what? It's not barbecue, it's clove. Clove is the note I'm getting here. There's a lot of clove presence here. Yep. Clove, spice, a lot of sweet. Yeah, that's pretty delicious. And I love the proof point of it. Yeah, if you guys are around Jack Daniel's, I would recommend grabbing one of those. That's actually really nice. Let me compare it to the special release from last year. Oh yeah, the special release is darker. It's a little bit more concentrated, and it's definitely easier on the palate coming off that first one. Even though it's only 7 points proof difference, there is there's definitely a decline on the spice level compared to the new Jack Daniel's Distillery. Yeah, this is all like roasted coffee bean, chocolate, slight hit of dark fruit, but not much. I mean, those dark flavors really come through. Go back to the Jack Daniel's Distillery Select. Yeah, that comes off more like a traditional rye. Just a lot of bite, a lot of spice. Again, that clove note, I think, is pretty strong in there. I think that's what's giving me kind of like that barbecue sauce, the barbecue saucy note that I was picking up. And just a good amount of spice in that one, and the proof point. So really, really good. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's as strong as the Detling, Tom, but I think it's close. So let's see here. I did a flight last year with the JD Twice Barrel. I did a flight last year with the JD Twice Barrel Rye, EHL Single Barrel, Forza, and JD 10, and it won. I was honestly shocked. I mean, I could see that. What's surprising about the Colonel Taylor Rye is that it's very chocolatey, which is something you don't necessarily get a lot of out of Buffalo Trace. But that mash bill that they use for that rye comes off very chocolatey with that high barley content. So I'm going to try to get the cast strength rye. I'm probably going to have to pay a pretty penny for it. But I'm just curious. I just want to taste that rye at cast strength because it's such a unique rye to me and such a unique product from Buffalo Trace. I hate to go Taterade on it, but I might have to. But we'll see. H. Taylor Rye is Barton. Yeah, it's a Barton mash bill, but it's that chocolatey vibe that it has that's so different than anything else. Like if you compare it to a Sazerac Rye or anything else that they put out. So it's interesting. Lucky 7 Frenchman. Classic MGP profile with no finish always reminds me of those yummy cinnamon apples from Cracker Barrel. Too much, though, and I get the Cracker Barrel bowels as well. Quentin King, I was with you. Then it was TMI. All right, guys. With that said, let's talk a little bit about MGP. He was in the chat last week when we were talking, about some different whiskeys, and I was like, hey, I mean, he's never been on the channel. I do watch his stuff. I do value his opinion. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Brian from Abandoned Bourbon. Welcome to the show, Brian.
What's going on?
How you doing, bud?
I'm doing good.
Are you in the middle of drinking something?
I was, yeah.
That's what I thought. Oh, what did you pour?
I am sipping on. We'll end up getting to it, I'm sure, because I see it on your table too. I'm tasting one of the 10-year blends from Dark Arts. I don't think that's what yours is specifically, but it is from Dark Arts.
Yeah. I have some Dark Art up here. Hey, we got Adam McIntyre with the first super chat of the night. He says, another rad Wednesday night. Stoked for this hang with Brian. Let's effing go. Cheers, man. Cheers to you,
Cheers.
Adam McIntyre. Brian Beyke in the house. Am I saying that right? Is it Beyke?
Beyke, like Nike with a B.
Oh, Beyke. Okay.
Yeah, failed shoe company and all.
I'm surprised I'm probably haven't gotten sued yet. Nike sues everybody. Since we're going to talk MGP and after the B48 annual event this weekend, I'm going to go pour one of their Dark Arts picks. Oh, yeah. Hell yeah, Dave. Love that. All right. So when Brian and I were kind of talking about, tonight's episode, we were, coming up with some topics, and we really thought MGP was a timely subject because, like myself, a couple of other groups have been able to go there and, see exactly what that operation looks like. Now, if you're taking it back to the early years of MGP, when everybody sourcing really started to become more popular, I mean, you're looking at some of those old school brands when you're talking about Smooth Ambler, Traverse City, Blount Brothers, High West, even the original Chattanooga 1816, and of course Boone County, and then how some of those brands have evolved into their own stuff today. And then some of the newer brands that are creating new expressions using MGP bourbon and whiskeys, and basically which ones we want. I think there's certain ones I feel like we could highlight because there's certainly a lot of MGP out there.
Yep. What I think is crazy, I mean, if you want to start there, what I think is wild is how many brands that, I was trying to think back about some of those iconic brands that were putting out the aged MGP around that time. And surprisingly, I feel like a lot of them aren't even around anymore. There's definitely some, like you mentioned, that morphed on. But man, RIP to some of these brands. You've had, I mean, Blount Brothers, I think they had some of the 36 and 21%. They were one of the only ones I thought at that time that were doing older age of the 21. But then it's like, well, where'd they go? Belmead, they're Nelson Greenbrier now.
I mean, Blount Brothers is still around. I mean, they make their own stuff still. I'm not sure what ages they have right now, but yeah, I think they're still around, even though you don't hear a lot from them, I don't think.
A little quiet.
Yeah, a little quiet. Yeah, I mean, there's just...
Is that just the small batch Boone County that you got on the table?
This 10-year?
Oh, is this 10-year?
Yeah, this is a 10-year. This is the 1833. I believe these were small batches, correct?
Yeah, because I lived in Cincinnati at the time when that was first, when I saw that on the shelf all the time, and people were like, oh, you should grab that. It's $47.99. Why don't you grab it? I'm like, well, there's no reason to. And now, people are paying tons for that.
What's nice about this is it gives you the mash bill on here. This is 7521 4. This is a classic MGP mash bill, aged in charred New American oak barrels, number 4 char. So nothing really surprising here, just damn good bourbon from MGP for the price. Now Boone County is putting out a lot of their own stuff. I think they're still sourcing the wheated mash bill. Is that correct, I think?
That sounds right. They just had, the 8-year wheated or something?
Yeah. I still think they're doing some of that. But, so I think what's interesting is not only the evolution of some of these source brands, but as you said, some of the brands that have gone away, some of the brands that have obviously transitioned into their own stuff. If you go back to the history of, some of those source brands, a lot of them, it's not so much that they went away. It's just the fact that their new make was ready in order to come up under their own label. Even though I still think in some circumstances they do still utilize some source stuff from MGP or Ross and Squibb. I feel like we should need to call it Ross and Squibb.
I hate that name so much, though. It's so
yeah, some of the best MGP I've had is this single barrel from Tumlin Dice. Oh, Tumlin Dice is a great brand that does some great stuff with MGP as well. Yeah, we mentioned Chattanooga, Travis. So if people don't realize, the Chattanooga, their original 1816 came from MGP because they were still in the middle of in a legal fight to allow distilling back in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Remember, when they started legally, they weren't allowed to distill anything. So they had to bring in some sort of whiskey in order to get the word out. And people were kind of disappointed when they found out it was MGP rather than it was the own Chattanooga distilled stuff. Eventually, they obviously got to their own distilled stuff, which they make now. But originally, Chattanooga 1816 was MGP source whiskey.
Yeah. I mean, even another one, too, you didn't really see it with bourbon. You saw it with rye, Whistle Pig, right? I feel like well-aged ryes, you started seeing from Whistle Pig way on before they kind of made their transition. I actually thought it was a pretty successful transition, too. I kind of liked the Canadian ryes that they had. But I think a lot of people kind of fell off of them too.
Yeah, for sure. Of course, we can't forget some of the the old school stories too, kind of like Chattanooga, where you're talking about what happened with Templeton. That was I think that was kind of the big thing that almost put a sour taste in people's mouths when it came to MGP. Because you have those. Templeton was touting that they have their own whiskey for sale from Iowa. And basically in 2006, they began to sell a rye whiskey that with the words that said small batch. And I think one of them was like Prohibition era recipe or something like that. And then people got pissed because they thought it was distilled in Iowa, but it was actually made in Indiana. The labeling was not correct at all. It turned out to be a lawsuit. Templeton had to pay a bunch of money for it. But I felt like that original story going all the way back to 2006 is what I think, and we talked about this a little bit, is what started putting sourced whiskey from Indiana almost give it a sour taste in people's mouths, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you do polls on here, or even just in the chat, I'd love to hear, one of the questions I feel like is kind of a big question that I think about is, and it might be skewed in the chat because a lot of people in the chat are going to be pretty into bourbon, but I'm kind of curious on a whole if the perception of MGP is more favorable or not favorable among people.
I think you're talking about MGP today.
Yeah, any of it really. I think people would probably section them off into different eras, but just in general, I feel like it's easy. I feel like I hear in circles a lot naysaying or talking down about another MGP brand. And I think there are factors. And I've got a couple notes here about like some factors that we could definitely dive into, but I am just kind of curious on a whole, are people more in the camp of stuff that's MGP sourced, regardless of brand, and maybe having some brand alignment as well? Or if they're like, no, if MGP, like distilled in Indiana, I'm staying away from it. No interest.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors, but I'm gonna throw this poll in here. Depends on. Let's see. I'm gonna throw a third option here. Depends on the NDP. All right. So I threw that poll up in the chat. You guys can vote. Is MGP more favorable today, or are you losing interest? Favorable, losing interest, or it depends on the NDP. So I'll be curious to see what you guys say. That is up right now. All right, so let's go through some of those factors that you had written out.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. But before you do that, I do want to pour something. I think I'm going to get right into this Boone County, dude.
Yeah, please do.
It's
I've looked vicariously through. I have one of the only still older pours I have is an older OKI reserve that I should
What?
have brought, and I did not bring back up to the studio. So
this is 90.8 proof, but 10 years old. I don't remember the proof on that being so low, but I guess
that's the weird thing. I thought. I mean, even OKI was that same sort of way, where their reserves, or their essentially their like tiny batches, were all kind of right around cask strength, the 100 proof, but their single barrels would always get into the 1 teens or something like that.
Yeah, so this is definitely that older school MGP, man. This isn't that citrus bomb that you mostly get today. This is more of that cherry cola, dark, rich oak, a little bit of that, like kind of, again, somebody in the chat said like that cinnamon apple. Man, that's good.
Yeah, that would be another thing to throw out in the chat too, or for people just to chime in. Like, when you think of MGP, is there a certain pocket that you specifically look for when you say, "Oh, it's MGP"? And if it is there a flavor pocket that you're like, I know that traditionally this is like something MGP has, or are there flavor pockets and you're like, no, it for some reason MGP tastes like this, and that's why I stay away from it.
Yeah, the haystack needles were amazing MGP. You're talking about 13, 14-year-old stuff with a finish on it. Some of those were just incredible. The graham cracker note in some of this old MGP for sure. Let's see here. What are other people saying? There's a lot of good MGP out there. There's also some legacy trash out there too. Yeah, Mr. Mom, that's some of the MGP that I can't stand when you talk about revived old whiskey brands that are just, they're taking legacy labels and old labels and just throwing 4, 5, 6-year MGP in it and charging a premium price for it. Stuff like that, I think, is what hurts MGP in the long run, because there's really no connection to the brand unless you know your bourbon history. And most of the time, somebody is just buying that label because it's still available. Nobody's using it anymore. So it's like, let's grab the rights to that label. We can use it and throw some 4 to 5 year stuff in it, charge $100 and see what happens.
Sorry, I'm checking out some of these comments in here.
Yeah.
The one early one too, I wanted to come back around to, that somebody had mentioned. Like, I made a comment here. It was Bose Wine guy was talking about the original barrel knuckle single barrel from early on.
Yeah.
So one of the guys had mentioned about that too, and I remember only trying one of these at a guy's house in DC and thinking that it was incredible, kind of close to hazmat if it wasn't hazmat on its own, and I didn't know what separated it, because again, it was just a 6-year MGP. But Bose Wine guy made a comment saying the original bare knuckle single barrels were in Kelvin barrels. We don't have to get into that right now. I think that's a point that I have in notes for later on. We could dive into as a factor.
Yes,
but
for sure,
I thought that was super interesting. Comment there too.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely get into the Kelvin stuff. But let's go down your list. What do you have as your first point?
I think several years ago, and maybe this even set off in the trajectory. Several years ago, if you wanted something different than all the legacy brands, while a lot of craft brands were getting off the ground and still a little on the younger side, it was one of the only things you could turn to, right? And so all there was MGP. It's not the case anymore. You're seeing tons of brands on the market, tons of people coming out with their own distilled stuff, and actually like hitting some strides with it too. And I think, that for better or for worse, that was the different profile from your Kentucky bourbon is having MGP. So that's, take it for what it's worth. That could be something that people don't like. It could be something that people do like about it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I do think I ran into a lot of people when I was getting into bourbon, that if it said distilled in Indiana, that's not the stuff from Kentucky. But again, that gets into that Kentucky purist mindset where there's a lot of people that think like only bourbon can come from Kentucky. And I get that mindset, for some people, especially if you're from Kentucky. But, people forget that, MGP was built in Indiana right there on the Ohio River because it's on top of a limestone shelf that runs from Kentucky into Indiana. Everybody thinks the limestone shelf stops in Kentucky. That is not the case. It is a huge shelf directly underneath Lawrenceburg, Indiana, and where they make MGP whiskey, which is what I think makes it so good. So I think people forget
quite a stone's throw to Kentucky, but it's about as close as you can get to a stone's throw to Kentucky.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, you're right. So like like historically, you go back to 2011, I think it was, when really the craft boom started. Folks needed barrels because their own stuff was aging, and I think away we went. And you saw a lot of, again, we mentioned Templeton kind of being that first out of the gate, but I think a big one out there was Smooth Ambler. I think Tumbling Dice was part of it too, but I think Smooth Ambler for me was kind of the first big discovery of MGP that I loved when it comes to like some of those Old Scout single barrels.
Yeah, they had some awesome stuff, and to be honest, they kind of slide into some things a little bit too that I think that we'll get to that put some frustrating things on the map. But yeah, they were one of the ones that inexpensive, available, special bottles in the gift shop to be able to pick up. I don't actually remember if I saw them very much in stores, but it's like one of those almost always things you could swing by the distillery and could grab cases. I was in little groups like, I'm taking the trip. I'll get 20 cases. Who all wants one? And they just had an array of bourbons and rye.
This is straight up cherry cola now. This is so good.
Mm.
Now I think I know why I hid it from myself.
That's right.
It was all the way
here in the studio.
Yeah, it was all the way in the back.
Come in sometimes and they're like, "Where's that one thing you like?" I'm like, "Well, I have this corner, and I'll hide it in a box or around a couple of things." Mainly for myself, some also for others, but mainly for myself.
There are so many blended 3 to 4 year MGP now that it just seems tired now. Not that there aren't good ones. I'm just saying, Cash 3. Yeah. That's why Brian and I will get into some of the ones you guys should be looking for and buying, not just some of the people that are taking that young stuff and throwing it in overpriced bottles. I think education is really the main way that you're going to avoid some of those pitfalls because there are so many MGP bottles out there. That's really the only way. Todd Ritter says Kentucky's limestone is better. Yeah, because I know Todd dug a hole. Todd dug a hole and licked it himself, so he prefers that one for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, though. I think I'll go ahead and move to the next thing I was going to talk about because that one.
Yeah, go for it.
Just price. I think people are tired of what we're seeing now. We are seeing an inflation of pricing bottles. I think we're just seeing that across. We're seeing the legacy brands and knowing that they're leaving money on the table, they're jacking the prices up. Other places, whether it is a craft producer and their costs legitimately are higher, which a lot of times they'll say because it's heirloom or because of pot still, smaller, all these things. The different unique cooperage, whatever it is. I think people are tired of seeing $99 for 5 to 7 year old product they know nothing about. I agree in that case too. Regardless of transparency, even if it has transparency, it's like, look, dropping 100 it's a lot for a guest.
Yeah, that seems to be kind of the going rate for most of the brands that are out there. It's like $100, 4 to 5 year stuff, and if it's just straight MGP, nothing really special about it, I don't really see that being enticing to most bourbon fans because I feel like there's better stuff on the shelf that's either older, higher proof, or obviously, it's like it's hard not to bring up Knob Creek 12 year, 100 proof, $60. Not that that's always available on the shelf, but you have stuff out there you're competing with, and I realize there's a lot of costs when it comes to sourcing. It's not the same as making it yourself. It drives up the price, but I do feel like there's people that try to take advantage of the market and what people are willing to pay. Now, I think that's coming down, obviously, and I hope there is a correction from bourbon pricing, but I guess we'll see as we go along here.
Right.
Cheers, Jason and Brian. The Smoke Eye Hill Barrel Proof by Crack Glass Line is very nice MGP distilled bourbon. Yeah, we'll talk about that one a little bit, Richie. I did see your Instagram post, so that was awesome. I think Mary Beth here makes a great point, and we'll definitely talk about this. She says, I was bored with MGP until I got into Barrel King and others just doing cool things with it. And I feel like that's that. What's that?
I'd love to hear more. I'd love to hear more of that thought and like say, what is the more being done with it? Is it that it's blended? Is it that it's like, is it a finish? Like, what are the things about it that made it come alive again?
Yeah, well, I mean, so if we kind of go through again, we're not that we have to go through every bottle in history here, but I feel like I don't think it's just about the MGP itself. I do think if you finish it, you blend it, you do some interesting things with it, you have a little bit more interest for whiskey drinkers to maybe try that bottle rather than just something that's straight, nothing done to it, 4-year, 5-year MGP, 21% rye mash bill. That's like $100. Now you take Smoke Wagon, for instance. Smoke Wagon and what they did over there. When you talk about making a connection with your consumer, that was the key for Smoke Wagon. The Instagram lives, I mean, they were so entertaining, and watching how that product was blended, how the blend was made, seeing the tasting notes come out as he was blending it, I think that's where the connection was made. So I think more than often than not today, if you're going to bring us MGP, you have to connect with your consumer in a way that's not done. That's not done by most people sourcing MGP.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. A lot of people jumping in comments too that also hit on what you're talking about. That just kind of has me curious, which is hitting on the last question I kind of asked about what flavor profile people are looking for. But I still think it's tricky to know how do you get it. How would a brand even get a general idea of what their customer's looking for? So like, I'm seeing a lot of comments here about Smoke Wagon. So Aaron going on and doing the lives and saying, oh, and this one I'm going for, I'm just really feeling the cactuses this time. And you know what? I'm just wanting to go for a really, really dry profile. It's like, well, is that stock? Are you truly, how much of this like work of art are people going to buy into? But then also, is he also doing that just to play around with variation because you have a diverse group of people that are drinkers, and you need to hit, differing palates.
Yeah, I think at the time when Smoke Wagon was at its peak, I think he could have done anything and people would have jumped at it. So I think he had that leeway. He had that flexibility to experiment and try different profiles and see what he could come up with. But now Smoke Wagon, unfortunately, it just kind of sits around. So it's interesting to me if it was just too many blends he was putting out. Why do you think Smoke Wagon went from something so popular to something maybe just not so popular anymore? Do you think it was the amount he was putting out, competition with other MGP brands out there? Because it's still a pretty good price point. So what is it?
Yeah, and William Wiley hit it, I think, really close right here. So I saw two things happen. So one, and I see this too. So we just got back. So we did a bunch of seal box picks in Nashville Barrel Company last week. And one thing that I remembered about Nashville Barrel Company, they're not big in the marketing. Like they're not flashing their name out there all the time. And there's a lot of other brands that are. They're wanting to get in your face. They're trying, it's tactics, right? But their products are incredible. And it's easy to forget that or even them because you're like, we've done Nashville Barrel Company picks before. Why don't we do something new, something fresh, something more trendy? However, tasting the barrels that we tasted, they kill it. And I think Aaron had the palate and he had the builds. But going back to what I said about William Wiley's comment, when you're talking about the batches in the low numbers and there seems to be a purpose to them all, and then all of a sudden you blink for a month and you're 70 batches ahead, and you can find it on any liquor store shelf anywhere. Now, that said, this is in Kentucky. So other markets, I'm sure they still haven't seen, a lot of Smoke Wagon on there, but online retailers too. And so I think we see it a whole lot. I think that scarcity is a fine line to toe between keeping hype and then letting hype dry. And another brand we'll probably talk about a little bit later, because I think they use some, but I don't think it's exclusive to that. K-Luke. I'm curious to watch K-Luke right now because he's pumping up. And I'm curious to see if he finds that right balance with the line to continue the momentum, continue the hype of people buying versus getting in all the markets, getting everyone to try it, and then, reorders fall off.
Yeah, I think he did what probably any businessman would do, to be honest. I think he wanted to, there was a strong market for Smoke Wagon. People wanted it. But then by the time it got to all the states, when you're trying to make that much whiskey, I always feel like if you're going to try to mass produce blends, put some stuff together quickly to get it out to a bigger market, I do feel like the quality can come down, especially if you're a smaller brand. So maybe that's what's happened. That combination with younger whiskey, the blends being really inconsistent, I just think it hit kind of a wall, unfortunately. As much as I love Aaron and what he did for so long, I mean, not to say he's still putting out some great blends here and there, but it's far more inconsistent than it used to be.
Well, and as like Joseph in here just made a thing. He said the last smoke wagon he purchased was Winter Oak. That's a good example too. I think before you had great blends that pulled from whatever stock he had, and it wasn't necessarily the rare and limited, right? No, it's not, Nathan. No, it is not. It
right.
Just I think he just had these great builds, and I do think that there's a difference between current MGP and several years ago MGP. They have some similar flavors, but not all buying's the same, not all sourcing's the same. And I mean, he had the keys to the castle. He might still be one of the only accounts I think that have access to, and maybe it stopped though with the newer, acquisitions and stuff. But I remember a lot of people not having access anymore to the barrels that they used to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think access to barrels is probably one of those behind the scenes factors that people don't factor in because of as you start falling in love with the brand, you always hope it's like that. But when you're sourcing, man, a switch flips at any moment, and then your entire profile you have to kind of work it back in, which could be very frustrating. Let's see. I feel like Smoke Wagon and Penelope were both racing to be purchased by MGP, and Smoke Wagon lost.
That's a great call. Yeah, it's a great call.
I think so too. But Penelope is a great case study in connecting with an audience. The thing that people take for granted with Penelope is when it came out, think about how many brands out there are named after a female. Mm-hmm. Not many. Widow Jane. I mean, there are a few others.
Big Nose Kate.
What's that?
Big Nose Kate.
Big Nose
Newer
Kate.
Brand.
Yeah, I mean, there's just not a ton of them out there. They're normally named after the distillery or some old dude from back in the 1800s. So
Mary Dowling, you got, but yeah.
Yeah. So when you try to separate yourself a little bit, I think Penelope did a smart move by naming their brand Penelope. They did kind of a tall, more elegant bottle. I think Mike and Danny were smart. They had something low proof first, did a rosé finish kind of geared towards that market for beginner drinkers, female drinkers, and then eventually got into some more releases that were more whiskey nerd related. I also think the smart thing that Penelope did is also put out some relatively interesting releases when you talk about whether it be Rio, Valencia, the Tokai, obviously offering the toasted barrels and stuff like that. But it wasn't like widespread to everybody. They were out there. Mm-hmm. People saw them and knew about them. But I think it just sparked more interest into what they were doing.
Yeah, I feel like Penelope breaks a ton of case studies, right? Because it's like anytime that you would want to say, oh, the Finnish whiskey trend is over, it's like, wait a second. Or if you're like, oh man, we all want cash strength, and they're like, no, but what about this 80 proof? You know what I mean? It's like, they are very interesting.
Yeah, Penelope does it, and everyone's doing honey. Everyone's doing Amburana. So what does Penelope do? Combine the two. Guess what? We're going to make Amburana and honey, put it together, something different, and people went nuts for it. It's probably the most elusive, hard-to-get bottle of the entire lineup. And then what happens? MGP comes back and buys back all their barrels from Penelope for quite a hefty price tag. So,
well, and again, and we can talk more about this, at another point in this call too. But another thing that's interesting about that case specifically, that New Hamburg here in the chat, he and I were talking about it earlier today, honestly, and it was what I think we're going to be seeing with the acquisition, and what you might have been subject to a little bit too on your visit last week is, I think almost even regardless of what people think about brands who have MGP and will continue to have like lingering MGP, is we're going to see a huge pump into Remus again as a house brand, Penelope as a house brand. And it kind of actually won't even matter about these other places because they're going to end up going full sail into these two and have full control over whatever they want to do.
Yeah. From what we were told, obviously some of the higher age stuff that's sitting around, we'll start to see in a lot of these brands coming from directly from Ross and Squibb. So the Remuses of the world, maybe the Remus Gatsby's, into the Penelopes and all those fun brands. So yeah, the poll, favorable, losing interest, depends on the NDP. So 55% of you said depends on the NDP. Only 15% said losing interest, and 30% said it's favorable. So I do think that the depending on the NDP is what matters. But this goes back to our point earlier. It just depends. You have to know what you're buying. You have to be educated on what you're buying. And unfortunately, not a lot of people know. Sometimes a fancy label will sell a bottle rather than knowing what's in it. The Master and Drum. How about Tin Cup 10 and 14-year? High age MGP at lower proof as affordable, having that high age statement. Yeah, this is another great example of MGP done right. I'm not saying
too, right?
Yeah, I'm not saying Tin Cup is everyone's cup of tea, pun intended. But I'm just saying because of that lower proof point, it's more approachable. But it's such a great price for the age you're getting, even though it's a lower proof. 14-year and that 10-year Tin Cup is really good stuff. So I'm all for Tin Cup and what they're doing. I hope we see more of it.
Yeah, I've not tried one of the newer bottles of the Bullet 12, but I remember when it first came out, getting a bottle and being like, man, if you're one who likes 95.5 rye, it's like, oh, this is great. And I remember a lot of people like, oh, well, they ruined it. They proofed it down. I'm like, I don't know. It was like $50 for 12-year rye. That's a pretty solid deal.
This is,
what do you got turned around there? What are you reaching for? Oh, Mayor Pingree, right?
Yeah. So this is one of the original Mayor Pingrees, a 13-year.
That's still one brand. That's one I've never tried any of their stuff.
This is probably one of the best bottles that I own. This thing is unbelievably good. I haven't had it in a minute, so yeah. Please discuss NBC a bit more. They don't offer any tasting notes besides known picks. How am I supposed to make a purchase? Says William Tortoriello. That's a good point, and this might give us a good bridge to talk about the Kelvin. So, so what was your thought on the whole Kelvin part of MGP and what's happening?
Absolutely. So I lately have been, when given the option, trying to find some Kelvin barrels as well too, but I still feel like there's more to it that I need to catch back up on or not. But again, one thing I'm realizing, I was just talking to Ryan at Pursuit. So the studio that I'm in is in Pursuit Spirits building. And so I normally do a podcast with them as well about Pursuit Spirits. And so one of the more recent conversations that he and I were talking about was about what people are looking for in products and what things people are talking about. And there's a video I posted on my channel, the Sealbox channel, like a week ago, which is what's exciting to people in whiskey. And while it was collaborating with Sealbox, which has a lot of MVPs and craft brands on there, I was surprised to see how many people were talking about the nuances that are active right now. This seems out of context, but it's not. It seems incredibly nerdy, and it is in a lot of ways. However, the nuances, the differences that people are doing with grains or with their cooperage, and all these sorts of things are making, I think, significant differences. One thing that you'll see too, you were talking to me about a specific pick that I don't remember if it's something worth talking about or something to bring up publicly or not, but a pick that you would talk to me about doing is an example that goes through that as well, about different finishing-ish secondary barrels. But I go back to that point of things that are differences to separate some older MGP to newer MGP. I think if you run into a Kelvin barrel MGP, which is, again, you have to trust who's selling it or who's knowledgeable. I mean, it's not something someone's going to know or say. But you can run into some Kelvin barrel products that are just they just manipulate the flavor in a way that you would think just the holding vessel shouldn't make that much of a difference on. But I've been pretty hyped on that right now. We picked earlier this year. We did a Kelvin Nashville Barrel Company barrel. 2 weeks ago we picked two more. We picked a Kelvin Tennessee, and so I'm hitting on a couple of things here. I'm talking about the Kelvin, but I'm also talking about Nashville Barrel Company. So Nashville Barrel Company, yeah, it is tricky. I will say this because at the end of the year, there is one video roundup that I do, which is about single barrels and like barrel picks, like some of my favorite single barrels. And I understand that it's one of the most biased lists that I could do because finding those individual barrels are more difficult than finding limited and rare bottles because the yield is so low. But the goal of the list is saying find channels, Mash and Journey, or Bourbon Junkies, or Shared Pour, or Sealbox. Find a place with people who you trust to bring picks in and whose notes that you align with. And the goal is that these brands have amazing liquid. Not every pick might be it, but hopefully people that you trust are looking for exceptional barrels from these places. And Kelvin is definitely Kelvin finished.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this is an interesting point by Todd Ritter here because I wholeheartedly agree with this. I think bourbon rye brand popularity is kind of following the craft brewing trends. It's all about the new flavors of the month. Brands that were hot slow down and newcomers take their place. But here's the difference. The newcomers that taking their place are the ones that I feel are connecting to specific communities and specific people. NBC, Nashville Barrel Company, I think, for a specific reason, has gotten the attention of not only the surrounding Nashville area, but also YouTubers, whiskey tubers, writers, bloggers, everybody in between because of those Kelvin-aged, MGP barrels they're putting out. Some of the most delicious, sweet, bold, flavored stuff you're going to find. I mean, Scott and I have done 7 or 8 picks of it. We have 2 more barrels we're about to drop for the MGP from NBC, I should say. Wink, wink to all the Mash and Journey members out there. Yep, we got 2 more coming. Really, we picked that second barrel that went missing on us or was slotted for another group by accident, but we found an incredibly good barrel to put out to the group. And again, these are those Kelvin barrels. But the issue with the Kelvin, and I'll say this, and I told this to Mike over at Nashville Barrel Company, because he felt so bad that he had earmarked the barrel we had chosen. Now, the barrel we chose originally was like drinking maple syrup, man. It was like breakfast in the glass.
Oh, yeah.
Like maple syrup, waffles. You know the barrels. You know when you come across that profile that NBC has. But so to kind of make up for it, he had sent us some 9-year barrels that he had. Kelvin, 9 years. And I told him that, dude, it went too far. The Kelvin barrel put so much influence on it, it almost muted all the sweetness from the MGP, and it just went pure oak, and it got a little bit dry. So that's what right? I feel like they have to be careful with those Kelvin barrels, but like you said, I think the 30 series, 31 series, 32 series, I mean, when you find those specific single barrels, so recommendation number 1 to anybody out there, I know they don't give tasting notes, but if you know that the specific pick that you're getting is Nashville Barrel Company, and it starts with a code of like 3,000 something, generally those are the really good Kelvin barrels. So I would highly recommend trying one of those out because they can be absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, the funny thing about, for those who are like, I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about when it comes to Kelvins, like, so Kelvin's the cooperage that their barrels come in versus, I don't know, I mean, a lot of different ones, but traditionally ISC, Independent Stave or something. But the funny thing about Kelvin is when it comes to like what char level they're at, they're just like it's more of a feel. Yeah. It's like when someone used to ask for direction somewhere and they'd say, well, you drive down the road till you hit the Walgreens, you take a left, you go over the train track. It's like that. They're like, Yeah, I know how to toast a barrel. I'm just gonna toast it. When it's done toasting, it's done toasting. So you can, it's a blessing and a curse.
I also think that MGP with these talented NDPs are producing flavors that we love but have been hard to find. Yeah, agree. And that goes back to Brian's point about linking up with a club or somebody that does single barrels that kind of picks the flavors you like to find, because they may have access to stuff that they're going to pick consistently. Bourbon Engineer, did Josh steal your barrel? I think he did. I think that Sunday Brunch was our barrel.
He's good at that.
He picked. That's such a good barrel, though. What will they do with?
I tried to invite him because he's in Nashville. So I tried to invite him to the pick when we do these Nashville, but that's when you all were down in Kentucky. So we just swapped places for a couple of days.
Yeah. NBC is all about the 15X for me. Yeah, absolutely. But NBC is also doing a lot of other stuff. They have some other distillate from other distilleries that they're doing great stuff with. We released a 9-year Jim Beam barrel that was absolutely incredible. Yes, Laser Code 3000. You got it. Sunday Brunch is the GOAT. Yeah, so it had that type of flavor profile to it. Sunday Brunch is amazing. There you go, Bourbon Engineer, 15X, 33X, 55X, and the OG 2X. For the bomb series.
I'm gonna copy this.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. Like those are the ones you have to find. We actually picked one that was it was distilled in Bardstown, but not Heaven Hill, and he couldn't tell us where it was from. He couldn't tell us.
Is it the 55? It's the 55 series, isn't it? Like the 8 years.
I believe it was. I think it was an 8 or 9 year. Yeah.
I bet if it was recent, it's probably one of these 55s, which is it's a run that a lot of people are talking about right now. We sold out of a Nash Tucky of one of those. I got another pick that we just did that. It's super tasty. It's a really tasty run.
The profile was so different and so good than anything I've had from NBC. Yes, thanks for the reminder. Whiskey Mountains, the Alzheimer's fundraiser this Sunday. Enter anytime, over 25 bottles, all links, prizes, details right at that link, guys. Go help raise some money for Alzheimer's with Whiskey Mountains. I love that she does this each and every year. Thanks so much, guys. Please support. Adriana, let me know. I'll throw a couple bottles in there to give away as well. I'll look through my. I'll look through all my floor whiskey. I'll throw something in there for you.
Hey, hook me up with that. How about I throw in one of these? How about I throw in one of these Kelvin NBCs into that? After this, give me some details. I'll throw one of those.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, I mean, if you're on Facebook or Instagram, definitely link up with Whiskey Mountains. Whiskey Mountains says I'll hit you up. So she's all over it.
Awesome.
Eric Sawyer says, "Who's this Brian guy?" It's Abandoned Bourbon, man.
Eric, my guy. I like to take claim to him. I like to take a small part of his win of Blendageddon because he did let me sample an early blend about 6 months before Blendageddon. So I kind of played a big part.
Okay, all right. I feel the craft beer trend was most successful when it was local breweries making it and being part of the community. When they got bought and the market became saturated, it failed. NDPs to follow. Again, acquisitions are very tricky, and they're extremely one-off each and every time. There's every acquisition is very special, very distinct. Not one of them is the same. I know it's hard not to just kind of lump them all together. Like, okay, this guy's being acquired, so we're going to lose that. I mean, look at what MGP did. They basically bought Penelope back. I don't think it's going to lose their value or lose their sensibility in what they make. I think if anything, it's going to make them stronger because now they have better access to some of the crazy stuff that MGP has. Now, if you look on the flip side, you could have a brand like, I don't know, I hate to bring them up, but High West. I feel like once they got bought out, a lot of their stuff, I know they did transition to their own whiskey, and I get that part of it, but I just felt like a lot of the stuff that they were creating that was getting out to the market is now really distillery only, which makes it tough. And I'm not sure if that's a Constellation Brands choice or if that's coming from High West. But yeah,
I feel like there are a lot of brands. So this is actually kind of tricky because Nathan's got a good point, and there are people who are still doing this really well, but I don't know that a lot of them are, like a lot of brands that I see doing this aren't sticking with the MGP buying kind of model. Like a lot of the brands that are staying local, they're also probably distilling and like they're giving back to the community, or they've got an on-site facility or whatever. Now I could be a little wrong about that. I'm sure there are brands that will prove me wrong in that. But you know, when I think about people, even, you know, one thing this is off topic, but like, you know, I asked Cam this question. He's like, no, I've never heard of him. Have you been to Bella Dayton or like tried Detrick Fine whiskey?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I talked to Cam. He's like, dude, I've never heard of him. I'm like, man, they're really close to you and putting out what I think is like some great stuff at a good age.
I think another,
you don't see access outside of.
Yeah. There's another local distillery here in Ohio called M&O Spirits that are doing some really great stuff too that a lot of people don't talk about. I think because High Bank, Middle West get a lot of the fanfare, some of those other ones are kind of flying under the radar. But there is some definite good whiskey being made here for sure. Going back to National Barrel Company and kind of that buildup that they've, you know, brought to the market with their Kelvin barrels and some of the other stuff that they're doing. I think another brand to really look at for everybody is, you know, it's a brand that's been talked about from the whiskey tube scene for a little while, but what they're doing, I feel, is building a community around the brand and making it a little bit more limited because you have to be a member to get it, and that's Barrel King. Barrel King is they are using other distillate besides MGP, but they're, you know, in the beginning they were mainly using MGP to make incredible blends, do vanilla finishes, do stag finishes, taking some stag barrels, some Weller barrels, some Willet barrels, changing the profile just enough to make it a little bit different than your typical MGP. Now, obviously, there's an art to it, and what Jared does, I think, is he kind of lets the whiskey tell him exactly what finish it needs, rather than just throwing it in a barrel and saying, hey, it was finished in a Willet barrel, let me make some money. I think he knows exactly what he's doing when it comes to blending and just giving it enough of a specific type of barrel to enhance the flavors in the whiskey. Stag Junior finish is silly in my opinion, says Nathan Jurgensen. It could be.
I'm kind of on that line. That's just because like I've not had. I think one buddy probably brought me a bottle of Barrel King before, but I've not really stayed in the loop. I've not really stayed, like, I don't talk all that much with Matt since he's done. So I'm actually a little further away from watching them, and so I am kind of that same way. I'm kind of like, oh, I don't know, what does a stag barrel do versus? Is it just, you know?
Honestly, for me, it's really not. The finishes are great, but it's more about the blends that they're doing. They're just doing incredible blends, and they're doing some different multiple finishes with Elijah Craig barrels, stag barrels, and just kind of combining those flavors to see what it does. As long as we can agree that Nulu and Good Times are not considered good MGP, I think we will all be okay. Yeah, Nulu kind of came out of the gates firing, but at $120 a bottle, I think it became a really tough sell after a little while.
Yeah. Well, man, I don't know what all I want to say here. I don't know what all I want to say here. I think that a couple of things came out of that. I think that we started to see with brands like Nulu that came in a lot more explosion of finished MGP, which raises the question, did it need it? Or is it just a good base? Because even what you said when it comes to blending too, MGP, that is the point I'd like to talk about, is that, and one of the things that I enjoy is that there are a lot of people right now, I think I even mentioned it a little bit, like Hey Luke, who are using MGP as a blending like component because it is such a good foundation. Like what I come from a coffee background too, so it's the same thing. Like there's certain flavors, certain origins that have a good foundation to blend with, on, around. So I could see it being a very pliable base for finishing. And to be honest, I've had plenty of boring MGP to say maybe a little something will give it, we'll round it out in a way that it's missing. So I think in my history, when it's come to Nulu, when it's come to Starlight, which is not MGP, but people who have such a wide skew sprawl and kind of went out and like had a little bit of a free for all, that is one of the types of brands that really I have to drive home to people that like I said earlier, I really want people to trust the outlet, the channel, the group, or whoever they follow, because there are so many variables. There's so many varying profiles that you could get. If you went and just said, oh, Vine Pair's got a straight MGP from Nulu, or Mesa Wine and Spirits has a Nulu, or Mash and Journey has a Nulu. You know, we do. That's when the flood. Oh, look at that! I set you up for it.
This is a legendary pick that we did. Everybody loved this one. It was the Spice Jam.
Spice Jam, yeah.
This was a port finish Nulu, and to be honest, we didn't even pick this bottle. This bottle was picked by another group, and they decided not to take it for some reason. So it got passed on to Scott and I, and we tasted it. We're like, what the hell? Why are they passing on this? This is incredible. So yeah, I mean, there were definitely some gems out there. I think the price point is what hurts Nulu overall.
Yeah,
120 bucks. So I'm not saying
realize that too.
I'm not saying it's like for like, but I kind of feel like Dark Arts is the new Nulu brand. A quick ramp up of brand recognition, seems to focus on blends and finishes, and about $100 a bottle. I mean, I don't think you're far off, but again, you have to give it time to see exactly. I think I can't even say that yet. So I can't say that yet. But what I will say is that I still think we have to give it time to see how Dark Arts utilizes all the different blends, and because they have other mash bills that they're getting in, see how they blend it, see what they create to be something new. Obviously, yes, they're doing finishes. They're doing some unique blends and some unique finishes on top of that. But I don't know if I would go as far just to call them a Nulu quite yet. But I think right now what they're doing is interesting. But we'll see how it goes. That's what you want from a brand. You want to see how they evolve.
Yeah, I can actually see. Well, if we were to talk about that for a second, I was actually surprised because I didn't think we had any Dark Arts picks like in the pipeline, and then all of a sudden we did. And I can understand why, because Macaulay is a name that you would think people would want to follow.
Yes.
But what I was actually surprised also to see just how quick everyone was starting to talk about them. And they've kind of landed on a few key flavoring, finishings, I should say. Some of them I'm a bit surprised about. But then so early on when we first jumped on the stream, you said, what are you pouring? So popped the 2-barrel 10-year blend. And
yeah, I got,
I didn't remember this tasting the way that it did when I revisited it, but it's a fun pour. That's a fun pour.
Caleb, that's the most
Caleb with the digs tonight.
Caleb Dark Arts. Oh, Jesus.
Macaulay would probably
I don't know why that made me laugh so much. It's just like you're kind of reading the chat, and all of a sudden you see Dark Arts, you just kind of laugh. Starlight. Like Starlight, but I would like to see higher age say more than just Ricardo Carroll. That is my point with Starlight. I feel like they're at the point. As much as I love Andrew over there, I love what Starlight's doing. I'm kind of over the 4 to 5 year finishes because I've had some of their straight bourbons that are 5-6 years old that are absolutely fantastic. That's what I want to see more of. I want to see some higher age statements coming into the fold. You could do a finish here and there, but it's just too much, and it's just all that 4 to 5 year old whiskey. The price is staying the same. You're getting the same age. It's a different spin on it. I think eventually people get tired of that, and they want to taste your stuff at a higher age. So I'm hoping we get to see that from Starlight.
And I think, to be honest, I think that they would like to see that too. I think what happened, what happened with Starlight was, and again, Dark Arts has a high age statement coming out, so maybe they won't have the same issue. And Macaulay's buying is a little bit different. Starlight, when they came on the scene, they blew up, and I don't think they were ready to be blown up. And you might remember this, and other people might not know this, but if you are not a reputable, sorry, I don't want to say that because that sounds really bad, and maybe that's not true. there was a point in time where I'd go and do Starlight picks, and you were only available to buy a third or a half barrel of something because they had to have some to go around. And so I think potentially what's going on with Starlight right now is more of a, if it's not broke, don't fix it. They keep within a 4 to 6 year mainly flavor pocket to do stuff with, to allow more to age, because they might have a stock problem of what they even have to age because of that quick ramp up that they were not ready for.
General question: are there wrong answers when describing how a whiskey tastes? If not, what utility does a whiskey review provide? So, interesting two-part question. I actually do get asked this sometimes. There's really no wrong answers because everyone's palate is going to pick up something good. What utility does a whiskey review provide? Well, first and foremost, you need to find someone's. So if you're tasting Buffalo Trace and you taste cherry, but the reviewer you're watching tastes, strawberry or something like that. Or even something more off the rails. Like he's tasting grape, you're tasting cherry, like I don't taste any freaking grape. Then you got to find another reviewer that has a closer palate to you. Generally, the palate that you line up with a little bit more is going to be able to provide you a little bit of a better review of what you taste and what they taste. So I think finding a palate that you line up with is first and foremost. As far as like what a whiskey review provides, like, a utilitarian type of aspect to it, it's a guidance, basically. If you find that palate that you line up with, you can find somebody that you trust. And also, the reviewer has to be honest. You can't, there's a lot of reviewers that I've watched that you could tell that they're, they kind of like everything. They never have anything negative to say. And I always felt like if you have never anything negative to say about anything, then I don't know if I could trust that person, because you're just going to constantly like everything. And there's no way you can like everything. I'm sorry. It's just, it's like you could tell they don't like it, but they don't want to say they don't like it. And I feel like you got to find an honest reviewer as well. So those are the two main things for me. What about you, Brian?
Yeah, this is something I hit on a lot. Your listeners might maybe never have heard me say this before. A lot of them probably didn't know who I was, but the conversations I had back with coffee, they still translate to whiskey. So when it all comes down to it,
wait, real quick. Somebody said I need to be on a coffee stream. You do coffee streams?
It's been a long time since I did coffee stuff. We could go into some information about that. It's been a long time since I did content specifically about coffee, but So
I think we should do like a morning stream of just us drinking coffee and talking whiskey while drinking coffee. How about that?
100%.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
So when it comes to flavor, the people who say that like tasting notes are kind of fluff, they're kind of made up, it's really just like, do you like it or not? There's a lot of truth in what they have to say. Yeah. And then people who taste through things, and people are like, oh, well, it's hard to follow along with somebody. They just taste from memory, experiences. That is also true. When I talk about tasting with people, or like when coffee accounts would come through, we'd set up a bunch of different coffees. We want them to find what they like. I would always say, look, my job here is not to tell you necessarily what you taste. My job is essentially a translator. Like, this person's going to taste things this way. This person's going to taste things, where's my hand? This way, or I'm going to taste things this way. You're going to taste things this way. It's not about alignment. It's about learning how your language translates to my language. How can I understand what you're looking for? You understand what I'm looking for. So to be honest, I think the number one important thing for a reviewer to do is just be consistent. If there is a flavor note that you call something, it actually, the accuracy of it does not matter. But someone who's watching the review needs to know when he says raspberry, in the way that I interpret that, that's always usually cherry, or it's always usually that. If we just call it randomly whatever all the time, it's not going to help someone who's trying to go through your archives to decipher how you speak about anything, about flavors. And so really it's just about saying, hey, if I'm one who's going to describe flavor, your job is really just to be as accurate as tight as you can with your own vernacular, so that it helps other people be able to decipher it and how they're going to understand it.
Yeah.
So it's not about right or wrong, or whether you actually taste strawberry or what. None of that matters. All it does is say, look, my goal here. So like when it comes to doing picks or seal box or finding something somebody likes, my whole goal, my job, I don't care if you find what I find. I want to find you what you want. And so I want to understand you. I want you to be able to understand me. And so we can find that, you know?
Yeah, I think the consistency is a big part of it. I think if you're watching someone that is calling out cherry and strawberry and maple syrup and chocolate and all these flavors that you know about them, then all of a sudden, they go off the rails and they're picking all these other flavors out. That's hard to translate over into someone that you can trust and be consistent about. I totally get it.
Yeah. I always thought it was interesting. This may actually be out of context, but I always thought it interesting. Like there was, I won't bring it up. It's an
no, it's a polarizing subject because there's a lot that you can. Yeah, I mean, I just always felt like if you try some whiskeys that that get recommended by a certain reviewer and you happen to like those whiskeys, then just keep watching them. But I wouldn't take too much context into what they're tasting, what they're describing. If you don't get that as well, because again, to Brian's point, experiences are different. I have a crazy palate with all these weird things that I taste because my grandmother fed me all these friggin' crazy foods growing up. So it always brings me back to
talk about those stories.
Yeah, it always brings me back to some of that stuff. So I've gotten plenty of comments on videos like, "There's no way you taste all that. That's bullshit. Fake reviewer." And I'm like, "That's fine. You could say that, but I actually ate that shit growing up. So your experience is different than mine. My experience is different than Brian's. But again, it's just in context. When it comes down to it, if the reviewer you're watching says this is a really good whiskey, you should go out and buy it, and you go out and buy it, and you like it too, that's all you need."
Well, and the interesting thing about that point too is that it's the same thing all the time. If you were to say I'm going to buy a new vacuum cleaner, and you go and look at reviews, you'll have just as many negatives as you will positives. Same thing with buying a car, choosing a paint color, a new watch, and then with whiskeys. Like I always find it fascinating to be like, you'll see someone talk about a review and they're like, "I love this whiskey. It's so sweet with a long finish." And the next reviewer would be like, "This whiskey was so spicy and so short." And you're like, I can't trust anybody, anything.
I'm sorry, but if any channel loved The Traveler, they immediately get deleted.
Yeah, I love it. Did you pick up this?
Which one?
Did you pick up James Lay's comment about if your reviewer watching Spy 3 looks like they're 13 and constantly mentions laser codes or playing a triangle, you probably need to move on.
Yeah, I know who he's talking about. I know who he's talking about there. That's fucking hilarious.
So Robert Shea, he just mentioned that's the point I was going to make when it comes to Four Roses. So yes, I'm really big into Four Roses and like tasting.
So I've been hearing this a lot. I've been hearing this a lot about you, even leading up to tonight. What is the connection with Four Roses?
I just like it. I just think, well, I mean, there's some other stuff too. So my dad, he passed away a couple years ago, and we didn't have a lot of things that we aligned on. And he wasn't actually really a Four Roses guy either, but we just didn't have a lot of things that we ever did together. But through the mellow moments, like he'd always be open to like doing events and stuff together. And so there were several events, releases and stuff that he and I would do and like that we would talk about. And that specifically was like one thing that I'm like, that's one of those intangibles that you put onto a brand or a thing or a person that just means, keeps it a little special. But just in general, I just like drinking Four Roses. Like if I'm going to default back to something, it's usually Four Roses.
All right. So your Four Roses is your go-to?
Yeah.
But yeah, by the way,
interesting because
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Even on the note of Four Roses, though, you would think microcosm, small brand. Same thing could be said with MGP. You think small brand, everything's probably going to taste similar flavor pocket. Like even some of the guys that I go to figure out if I'm trying to get reviews or information on certain barrels of Four Roses, you realize there's certain people you can trust and not trust because Four Roses puts out product from high 7 years old to 16 years old. And you have people who don't like oak. You have people who really like the younger, sweet, caramely ones. And so like I'll talk to one guy and he's like, "Oh man, I hate that barrel." I'm like, "But I love this barrel. Why?" And I'm like, well, now I've learned even with one brand, people will go either way into a flavor profile. And I think when I started to see that, it made me realize even a larger span of whiskey, you really got to find people that you trust.
Yeah, behind Russell's Reserve single barrel picks, Four Roses is the other one that I buy the most of when it comes to single. When I was at Barrels for Hope, I just got an 11-year pick that they did. That is absolutely fantastic. Yeah. I love Four Roses. What's your favorite LE? I'm not going to say of all time, but give me your favorite LE in the last 6 years, 5 or 6 years.
I mean, 2019 for sure. In 2019 in the last, so yeah, we're 2004. So the 2019 was probably my favorite LE. It could be the 135th because I think that they have a lot going with one another. AW brought up a really interesting thing though. He asked 130th or 135th. Now on the palate, I think 135th beats it, but I have really fond memories of 130th. When I first, one of the guys that helped me get into whiskey, him and his wife were in town, and we camped out for the 130th, and that was just a really fond memory. So we popped it as soon as we got home from the release, and it was just so enjoyable. But objective, blinding, it doesn't perform as well.
Yeah, top shelf Dustin, I see what you're saying, but I'll still take a Four Roses pick over most other stuff any day of the week. I don't mind paying
for the proof and the age.
Yeah, I don't mind paying a little bit more for a Four Roses pick because it's better than most of the shit that you're going to get from another pick. Bourbon Kingdom in the house.
Oh yeah, what's up, Zach? One of these breaks the rule. One of these doesn't break the rule.
Yeah. I gotta get those guys. I gotta get those guys on next. I love talking with Bourbon Kingdom. What's going on, man?
Absolutely. Yeah, most of what's interesting is I kind of wonder when people got away from. I don't know if it's just that we had a lot of options that broke it, but like I used to think that people thought $10 a year was a good calculator. So Four Roses, yes, the price has gone up considerably percentage-wise in the last couple of years, but still follows for the most part a $10 a year rule, where a lot of MGP brands cannot say the same thing.
Old Forester pick versus Four Roses pick. Four Roses all day long.
All day. I'm not an Old Forester pick fan,
and it's not even close for me. So here's the thing: Old Forester pick, the barrel. I'm guessing Jared's talking about the barrel strength ones. Those are 4 to 5 years old. They drink really hot. Some of them can be really good. Depends on what you get. Obviously, you have to be really careful with those picks. And yes, there's a lot of brunt force of flavor that you get on those picks. But when it comes to complexity, layers of flavor, age, what you're getting for your money, Four Roses hands down.
Here's what's interesting. So Richard even he said Four Roses mash bills confuse me, which is true. And then the recent information about them having like more mash bills, like going back to what you said about Smoke Wagon, and what did it for them and broke them. Yeah. Now, Four Roses is not really a small brand, but I'm really curious to see what that.
Lost your mic. Can't hear you. Can't hear you. Your mic's gone. Did your battery die on your mic?
No, it didn't.
There you go. Yeah, you're back now.
I feel like that's the kind of brand that could swamp the market and not actually have ever given people what they wanted.
I'm sorry, say again, which brand? Smoke Wagon?
No. With Four Roses expanding.
Oh, Four Roses. Yeah.
Beyond the 10 mash bills, which is already confusing to so many people.
So what's your favorite recipe, if you have one? If you had to pick one to drink forever, where would you go?
I don't know that I could pick a OESB. Yeah.
Wow, that's kind of a, you know what? I probably hear that one more often than not, is in either OE or OBSV. People seem to gravitate to it.
OBSVs, OESVs, and OESKs are my favorites.
OESK is probably my number one. And I will say the OESF or OBSFs recently have become favorites for me just because the F ones I just never had a lot of, but recently I've been getting my hands on some of those more often, and I really enjoy the fruit-forward notes of the Fs. They're really nice.
The how active the chat is here. I feel like we should do a follow-up stream sometime that's about Four Roses instead of MGP, because I bet there would be a lot of people who want to do more Four Roses talk too.
Dude, yeah. I mean, I did all 10 recipes blind in one video. I don't even know how I stood up after that. And I think I think the F1 in the blind. But again, these are single barrels. These are single barrels I had. I feel like the way to go is to do it through that tasting kit where everything is the same proof. Everything is the same age. That's really the way to do it. So
my buddy sent me a picture. So if anyone here lives in Atlanta, my buddy yesterday sent me a picture from Tower Liquors, and if I need to find the exact store, I can. And they had the tasting boxes for $49.99.
$49 for those? Holy shit!
It's got to be mislabeled. So again, if you were in Atlanta, go to Tower and buy the tasting box, because that's a ridiculous price for that.
Yeah. Now I have to play the falling video. Okay, yeah. This is what happens when you drink too many Elijah Craig barrel proofs. Not saying, I don't know. This didn't happen to Four Roses, but it happened with Elijah Craig. I fell. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
You never saw that?
I've seen it, but it's always so good.
Yeah, just broke my ass. Yep. Actually, real quick, before we kind of get into kind of our final points here at MGP, because there are some interesting connections with Four Roses, which I'm sure you know, in MGP. I do like to go through a little bit of I know it's a little bit late in the night, but I do like to keep people updated on some of the new stuff that's coming out. The Old Forester Rum Finish 117 series. I don't know if anybody's interested in this. I actually had this at the Barrels for Hope meetup, and all I can tell you is that it smells glorious. You could smell the rum, you could smell the maple syrup, you could smell the banana, you could smell it smells like Bananas Foster, but when you taste it, it just falls flat. You want that flavor that you get on the nose, but it does not translate to the palate, unfortunately. So if I had to give you guys a quick rating for that one, skip it. It's not worth chasing that one. Yeah, Penelope Toasted Rye is coming out again with a little bit of a higher H statement. So I think that's a really cool. Speaking of Penelope, another great expression that they're going to be releasing really soon. The Quintessential out of Cedar Ridge releasing this cigar blend, which I'm going to be hot. I'm going to be trying to get this one because I love everything that Quint Murphy is doing over at Cedar Ridge with the Quintessential. I'm going to try to have him come on after my big work trip next week, so I'm excited for that. It looks like Bullet is coming out with a very special bottling, Brian. Have you seen this yet?
No.
It's very special. I just want you to know. I don't know what makes it so special, but it says bottled and bond, so it's 100 proof. But if you look at the back of the label, this is distilled by Bullet. So this is their own stuff.
Oh, that's what's special about it.
I think that's what's special about it. Now,
extra special, very rare.
Extra special, very rare. Now, I'm thinking this is going to be a 4 to 5 year old product from Bullet, and they're putting out their own distillate as a very special bourbon.
I've never heard of a bottled and bond 4 year before. I'm really excited about this.
But it's extra special, man. Come on.
It's gotta be. I'm ready.
Okay. Speaking of Penelope, it looks like their estate collection is going to be coming out. These are going to be 10-year-old single barrels that they are releasing. The proof on the I saw that. The proof on these are going to be pretty crazy. We were talking to Danny about this last weekend, and these should be really interesting releases. I actually can't wait to get my hands on some of these. They're releasing a bunch of these estate collection 10-year single barrels to the market, so keep an eye out for that. Obviously, this is all MGP.
Yeah.
And last but not least, speaking of 117 series, we have the extra old Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey from Old Forester. What's weird about this one is you say it's extra old, but you don't tell us what the H statement is. So how do I know it's extra old, Old Forester?
because it's just extra. Oh no, they did extra old already though, right? So this is just
They did an extra old. It was a 1910. They did it. Yeah.
It's actually younger whiskey. They just have it secondary finish for longer.
It just says extra old on it. Like what? Give me an age statement if you're saying it's what makes it extra old.
I want the very extra old is what I want.
I want to know. I laugh out loud. Extra old says 6 year. John Boyer. Yeah. I don't know. 13-year wheat whiskey in that lineup as well. 10-year Penelope single barrel. Well, isn't that special? Church lady. Well, isn't that special? I remember her. It was aged 18 months in the second barrel finishing versus 7 to 9. It's 7 to 9 months older than it was. Yeah, that's what I'm afraid it actually is. All right. So, Brian, really quick before we kind of get into our last kind of points we're going to make here about MGP, I will talk a little bit about the connection with Four Roses that I learned, but also the different mash bills. Where did Abandoned Bourbon come from? Where did that name come from?
Oh man, that's a tricky one. It is the looking for a glass. The Abandoned name is something that's just at this point in time it's almost more of a joke than anything. So when I first started my coffee account, it was called Abandoned Coffee to use as a placeholder because I had told myself if I was going to open my own coffee shop, I wanted to open a coffee shop where the staff was like trained very, very well on execution. Kind of the same thing we talked about with like the language. Like you'd be able to help communicate to somebody else what they're looking for to a point where like it wouldn't detract from your ability to actually make the coffee, so that you have very specific. I grew up with a psych degree, and so my goal was that you have very intentional conversations with people in order to lift them up, in order to help them with whatever they might be going through the day, and just a safe place to go and essentially like help people who might be dealing with strongholds, breaking strongholds, whatever things might be weighing them down. You just execute coffee well and just have very, very specific conversations with people. That is like the initial inception. And then, but everything that I kind of got into from that point, I just put Abandoned in front of it. So I had a podcast and did San Francisco judging for chocolate. So like I had an Abandoned chocolate account. When I started doing stuff with bourbon, I was like Abandoned Bourbon. And that way, whenever I stop doing those things, it should come as no surprise to anybody. So.
All right. That's cool. I like it. I kind of like the entire evolution of that. That's kind of cool. Real quick, guys, two of the best people that I've ever met in Whiskey Tube, Black Bourbon family, Jason and Brandy, celebrating 20 years of marriage today, and they cracked a Russell's 15. Cheers. Everybody raise a glass to Jason and Brandy. Love you guys. Hope you guys are well. Congratulations. They're two of the greatest people I've ever met. I loved hanging out with them and meeting them in Chicago. Happy anniversary, guys. That's awesome. All right, so real quick, I do want to talk a little bit about the kind of the connection that I learned. I had no idea until I was at MGP with the, that connection with MGP and Four Roses, which was really cool. A lot of the same distilling and the same way that they code their different mash bills and recipes is kind of the same way they do it at Four Roses. So we talked a lot about this last week, the association between the two. But both Seagram's and Four Roses would test each other's yeast strains back in the day. They used the same recipe abbreviations that were invented during the Seagram's era. So, for example, like an OESV at Four Roses would be an LESV if it was distilled at MGP. And they use all these different codes. So MGP mash bills, you have E, which is their low rye mash bill. That's the 21% rye. You have B, which is their high rye. You have Q, which is their 95.5. You have C, which is their corn whiskey. D is their high corn bourbon, which is essentially their light whiskey. Then you have their rye whiskeys. They have their wheat whiskeys and malt whiskeys. We didn't really learn what those codes were, but they have a ton of mash bills, obviously, that they're creating. But that connection with Four Roses, I always thought was really interesting, especially once we learned, how they both did their yeast strains, and they both. And I'm not sure about Four Roses, but I know they share. I do believe that they share yeast strains with each other still to this day.
Interesting. Is some of their letters also mean absolutely nothing? It just helps to confuse people, like the O.
Well, yeah. So like the O because it's not means other distillery. That's all O means for for Four Roses. That's all it means because it wasn't like the same distillery that would, because the distillery essentially wasn't in Kentucky, so they just called it the other distillery, which I think is hilarious. So, will there be a quiz, Whiskey Mountain? Yes, I'll send you some questions tonight. Yeah, you have to learn all the codes. I'm gonna have to try to remember all those codes, but yeah, for sure. So, all right, so let's go through some of the people or the NDPs that you feel are doing MGP right. I think we named a couple of them already. We said National Barrel Company, especially when you talk about those specific single barrels that are coming out. I would argue I think Barrel King is doing some great stuff as well with their blends. Love what they're doing. I think Dark Arts right now is worth the gamble in trying what they're doing because Macaulay is an absolute madman when it comes to blending and finishing. Backbone. I think we haven't really talked about Backbone too much. And what they're doing there, I think they are taking a lot of that whiskey that they have. They're ultra aging it, throwing it in some different casks, and I think some of that stuff has been absolutely delicious as well. Anything else that you want to add, Brian?
Yeah, and again, this is not purely MGP, but again, I think it kind of on a line like with you said, Barrel King. I think K. Luke's doing some cool stuff. When it comes, I don't know what %. But and again, they just hit on a flavor profile that like for a guy who likes Four Roses like me, that they just they're hitting it. Another one too that, to be honest, it actually surprised me. I thought that they did more of their own stuff, which they do have some of their own stuff, but ESW, like when I realized like ESW does a lot of that, I was like, dude, they're doing some, like their staple products are a different flavor profile because of what they're doing, right? They're stay finished or whatever the products that are, Georgia Heartwoods or the Fiddlers, whatever. I mean, they're toasted, the toasted Fiddler rye. Is this the rye or the bourbon? Yeah, this is a great toasted rye last year. And someone already mentioned Tumbling Dice. Tumbling, that we're starting to see. Not every brand that has product this age, I'll preface, is firing on all cylinders. But we're starting to see 8 to 10 year stuff, and I think that there's a lot more positive products being put out by brands. And so, like, to be honest, Tumbling Dice have been putting out these 8-year ryes, small batches of single barrels last year going into this year, that I just think are great. Here's another one that not all their products are MGP, but some are. We did a pickup recently that's a pretty hot name, but a very expensive bottle. The Altschuler stuff from Tour Ride. So Woodward Collective. Woodward Collective's been put.
Yeah, Woodward Collective is stuff. Yeah, they're putting out some great stuff. That's actually a good call out. I love the call out of K. Luke, what they're doing. Art of the Spirits out of Colorado. They're doing some really interesting stuff with some of the MGP that they're getting. Copper and Cask was a great call out. Master Journey recently, we did a pick that's going to be coming out here in a few weeks. Copper and Cask, that's absolutely delicious. Let's see, Rare Character. I think Rare Character for me, it's more about their ryes, the 95.5 ryes that they're getting, how they're aging it. Those are fantastic rye whiskeys. Nathan Jurgensen says Manifest. I've been hearing a lot about this Manifest 10-year.
Oh, dude.
I've never had it. I've never even seen that bottle.
We're going to talk after this. I want to put together a box of like some steel box, like some of the things that I've been like really digging this year, some of which are some MGPs. And dude, this Manifest is awesome.
I actually want to send you too this ASW pick that me and Scott did. This Georgia Heartwood single barrel is, because they throw those Georgia Heartwood staves in it, it's like drinking pecan pie. It's ridiculously good. Yeah. It's so rich. What's that?
When did you guys pick that one?
This was late last year. We picked that one.
Okay.
Yep.
Here's another one that now I tried the samples, and to be honest, if I could have, of the samples we tried, if I could have bought all the barrels, I would have. So given that small sample, I feel like they could have a good track record, but no one talks about them. No one talks about them. Jepson's bourbon. So Jepson's who does Malort, right?
Yeah. Yep.
This here, it's one. I thought it's really well priced. But again, I can understand people are like, it's 7-8 year MGP. Dude, this is like a sleeper bottle this year.
Yeah, and the price on those are amazing too.
Yeah.
Traverse City, especially those high age rye whiskeys they have. Totally agree, Todd. Doc Swinson's, I can't say I've had a lot of. They're just not available here, and I don't know. Whenever I do see them, there's always something else I need to buy over it. But I have heard some good stuff about Doc Swinson's. Cat's Eye, I do love, obviously, what Gene is doing over there, especially their light whiskeys. And he's starting to play a little bit more with just some of like the Bourbon blends, which we selected at one point, which was great. Let's see here. Oh, River Root. The only River Roots I've had is the one that they sent me that was like a hazmat single barrel, and it was a port finished.
Yeah, those were wild.
It was like to me it was too much port. It was way overdone, and it just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth since then. I can't say I've had another one since then, but I felt like the port got to that sulfur level for me where it was tasting a little bit of just like that nasty sulfuric type of note from all that port influence. And I can't say I've gone back to it since, but I heard there's some good stuff out of there for sure.
I've not tried a lot of their MGP stuff. It's usually only been Kentucky stuff. And this is a brand that I would probably say now going into the next couple of years, people should watch, that probably got no love before, but I see it on your table too. Pinhook. This Pinhook 8-year, like just their batch bourbon from last year was an awesome model.
So good. This was a sleeper bottle from you last year. I never really was crazy about Pinhook until I had this bottle. So much so that we picked a 9-year single barrel MGP that might be one of the best MGPs I've had this year. So, but this stuff is, yeah, I agree. Pinhook was never really too much on my radar because Pinhook to me was always just like another MGP brand, and I understood the vertical, which I thought was very clever. But I don't know, it never really resonated with me. But I don't know, you hit a certain age, and damn, it gets really good.
Yeah. Going back to what someone had mentioned, and you were like, I didn't have much experience with them. I like Doc Swinson for price, and I do think though that you kind of run into some stuff. Where's that? Here it is, the Golden Hour. So this was a Fred pick, but this one was really popular, following along the lines of finished stuff and like the Rio. I mean, this is rum and tawny ports. But when the Golden Hour came out, this is 7 years old. This one here I actually thought was older. I thought this one was like a 10-year bourbon, 10-year rye in the end. But this is I think this stuff's reasonably priced. They do some really interesting finished products. But they're also one differently than older MGP. You know, I started catching their name from their exploratory casks of that 12.5% mash bill that was floating around a couple years ago. But even that was affordably priced for what it is.
Is Rare Character all sourced from MGP? No. Rare Character sources from a bunch of different places. They source from Heaven Hill a lot. They'll source from a lot of places. I think their ryes are generally mostly from MGP, but they're exceptional series. You'll find old bourbons in there. You'll find malt whiskeys from Heaven Hill there. There's a lot of crazy stuff that they're sourcing.
We've even got a Kelvin. We got a Kelvin MGP from them dropping here in about 2 weeks.
Oh, dude, you're gonna have to send me a link for that.
And their run's fun because it's, for some reason, the ones I've tried from them are a lot sweeter than the Kelvin MGPs that you try from Nashville.
Oh, interesting. What, sweeter than that?
Yeah, and more like, like the kind of orchard fruit type note you can get out of some MGPs.
Yeah.
And less of just the kind of darker fruits and like marshmallow. I think it has a little bit more of that in there.
Thoughts on Kentucky Owl, Rizzle D? Just stay away from that stuff. It's way too overpriced for what it is. Do you think MGP will ever come out with an MGP brand itself or keep itself in the shadows? They do have their own brand. It's called Remus. That is the MGP brand. All the Remus bourbons.
I think it's only going to get bigger.
I do, and I think from what I tasted last week, the stuff that they're going to be coming out with, I think the bourbon market better hold on to their ass because some of this stuff was unbelievably good. So yeah, keep an eye out for some of that MGP. That sulfur candle note is the worst. Yeah, that's all I got on that River Roots. It was just too much. I love what Pinhook is doing with the following, the 4 to 13-year journey. Yeah, if you get kind of linked into that, I could see that people will just follow that, get that vertical. Donald Rance is here. What's going on, Donald? Nice to see you, man. Pinhook confused me too much to bother. I did try a few, and they were good. Yeah, they are good. Isn't Rossville Union? Yes, Rossville Union is also an MGP brand. And I think that's the problem, and we talked to Ian about this, Ian Stursman at Master Distiller, how they're still trying to work because it's such an industrial forward type of experience. You can't really do, there's no like hospitality there like built around that distillery because it's so industrial. So I think for like a visitor center type atmosphere, they would have to build something a little bit outside of their or kind of on the outskirts of their footprint. But yeah, Brian, I don't know if you heard me, dude. They have a freaking rick house that has 250,000 barrels in it, which is insane.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's insane. I
wasn't able to go. There was a trip I really wanted to take to MGP, knowing how infrequent they let people in there. But I wasn't able to make it happen. So I need.
What's everyone's feeling on Augusta? Augusta, I think, is now. I don't know if it's changed, but Augusta was mainly Barton sourced, I believe. I don't know if I know they released a new 17-year. I don't know if that was still.
I know that. I know that I'm pretty sure their whole crutch is Kentucky bourbon.
Yeah, and from what I understand,
bourbon was meant to be.
Yeah. You made some Kentucky purists very happy there. That's not a Rick house. That's a Rick complex. Yeah, exactly. Frank Augusta, I believe. No, I'm thinking of Luca Mariano. I'm thinking of the Mariano. I think that's Wilderness Trail sourced, but I think Wilderness Trail turned off that well, so I don't know where they're getting their stuff from now. But yeah, I think we mentioned a bunch of different brands that are doing MGP right. There is a lot out there, and it just really goes to show you guys, like, when it comes to education and knowing what to look for, some like a conversation like this can open your eyes to a lot of brands that are doing MGP right, not just creating or buying some vintage whiskey label, throwing a price on it, and trying to sell it. There's a lot of great MGP out there that people are doing great stuff with, and even MGP themselves or Ross and Squibb themselves, the stuff that they're going to be coming out with, and these single barrels are going to be hitting the market here at the end of the year, it's just going to be incredible whiskey. So keep an eye out for that as well. Is there a chance the Old Stubborn could have been MGP sourced? It's a good question, but I don't think so because that was all pot still. Yeah. And yeah, they don't really run a pot still like that at MG unless it was hiding somewhere, but we didn't see a pot still at all.
I don't think it was marked as it wasn't even marked on the back as distilled in Indiana, right?
No, it wasn't.
Not like that stops some people. You could be produced by, but still.
Yes. Yeah. Even though it says produced by, it most likely doesn't mean it's distilled by. I always remember that. What's the deal with Barrel? Still don't know. Barrel's not going anywhere, guys. I actually just got a Barrel just sent me this. They just sent me this is the new label. Barrel just sent me their new number 36. This is the new look label from Barrel Craft Spirits.
I haven't cracked it down as if it helps me see the label better.
What's that?
I like how I'm ducking down to see if it actually helps me see the label better. I was seeing if it was open.
Yeah, you're ducking down and getting closer.
Underneath the block of your video.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is cast strength. So let me see if I can. Hold on a second. Let me move this so everybody can see the close up here, because I do think there's some interesting tidbits that they put on the label now. So cast strength of blended straight whiskeys, and you could see Kentucky 9-year, Indiana 7.5, 8, and 10-year. Then they have Tennessee 8 and 15-year in there. So it breaks down everything right on the front of the label, and then you also get the nice big number there now, which used to be handwritten and very tiny. So I like the new label. I think it's a little bit better from what they've been doing in the past. So I'll try this now real quick. I mean, why not? It's got MGP in it.
That's right.
Jason, the MGP distillery looked huge. Yep, it is huge. Their footprint is a mile. So a mile of distillery, of warehouses, the actual distillery itself. It's ridiculous. Brian, do you have a Patreon or just have picks through Sealbox?
Man, you know what? You got a lot of people in this chat. I would love to actually hear. I've been thinking about this a long time. I had a buddy who kept pushing me and saying, you got to do a Patreon. You got to, and I never set one up. And I feel like I'm very lucky that presently I don't have to. Like I do for Sealbox, I am tasting and taking notes and taking photos of whiskey all the time. And so like I like to think of myself as being able to have a channel and also just being an asset to provide hopefully guidance, notes, whatever, like at no cost to anybody. But when I was talking to my buddy about that, he's like, well, I don't want that though. Like I'll get more value if I pay you for it. I'm like, I mean, I'll give you my Venmo if you just care that much. I just don't see that it's necessary. But I'm curious though, because I wonder if other people think the same way, where they're like, hey, I get value out of your channel. I want to be able to do that. I don't feel like I need to, but no, I don't.
I mean, here's the thing. If you have a following and you have fans that trust your palate, what's the old saying? If you're good at something, never do it for free.
That's true. I feel like I'm a college grad driving my Corolla with a puffy paint on the window that says Venmo at. Like that's what I need to be just doing. Just my new logo is just going to be Venmo at.
No, in all honesty though, I think I love Patreon not only because it allows me and Scott and to open up doors to get to do experiences like we did, but also to pick barrels for the people that follow you and trust your palate the most. A big part of my Patreon that we do a lot is a lot of just private live streams with me and my patrons, and I get to connect with them and talk with them all the time. And I think that's like, for me, that's the best part of it. It's not just about, the money is nice, but a lot of that money goes back into the channel. A lot of it goes back into merchandise, and stuff like that. But overall, it's really about connecting with, your patrons overall. And it sometimes, if it helps you benefit into opening some doors to get different picks, offering them up to them, then so be it. But I mean, if you're really community focused, which I know you are, then I think that's really the best part of it.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if I can get there. Richard just gave me my name. It's kind of like ADHD fishing, right? He said abandoned Patreon has a nice ring to it. So, we'll see. Yeah,
I followed Brian for a long while and enjoyed his takes on Four Roses recipes. Mash and Drum, who's the better blender, Barrel or Bardstown? Oh shit, that's a bold question right there.
That's a bold question. There's
I don't know.
To take into consideration.
That's a lot to think of, because you have to. I'll say it like this. I think I probably would gear towards Bardstown overall. However, I think Barrel Craft Spirits blends Dickel better than Bardstown does. Because whenever Bardstown uses Dickel, I taste it immediately. When I have certain Barrel Craft ones, I don't always taste it. Like this one has obviously Dickel in it, and it's really not that strong to me. But I feel like when Bardstown does it, I taste it immediately. So I don't know if that's like of a plus or a minus of how you would grade it, but I don't know. But again,
okay. Well, let me ask you this question: If you were to try and be price conscious as a blender, who's the better price conscious blender? Would you rather have a barrel batch, or would you rather have a fusion?
A fusion? Well,
Yeah,
they don't even make fusion. They don't even make fusion anymore.
I know, but that was their what's their entry blend then?
Yeah. I would still go after a barrel on that sense. But then when you're talking about like discovery versus barrel, there's definitely some arguments to be made for barrel in that conversation, because barrel's only $100 and the discovery series are now 130 to 160 depending on what's in it.
Tell us that you don't love seagrass without telling us that you don't love seagrass, Jason.
What do you mean I love seagrass? The only barrel I've ever not liked was Dickley. Yeah. I don't know. That's a really good. That might be a good stream, like blind tasting. But yeah, oh yeah, there's always this. Jay Porter just kind of mic dropped it. Chateau de l'Abad, case closed. But
that's it.
But again, that's not.
To be honest, talk about MGP. That was in my notes. I never came back around to it, but like, you know, Bardstown, they came out swinging with their special bottles, with finished. It basically just being like, 12-year fantastic MGP and Chateau de l'Abad in the Goodwood Honey Ales and the Copper and King's Apple Brandy. These are some like of my like top bottles of all times. Like just so good.
I mean those old discoveries with the older MGP. I mean those are friggin' they're hitters. They were hard to beat, man. They were so good. I feel like Barrel is the better blender. Bardstown hit it out of the park when they had old whiskey. Barrel blends younger whiskey and still makes it taste good.
That's true.
Green River is killing it too. I agree. Green River is killing it. And not only with the quality of whiskey, but the price points are just amazing from Green River.
William Wiley has an interesting, he mentioned Seagrass and Dovetail are amazing. I'd be curious to the people who have tried both, if they prefer Seagrass or Dovetail.
What would you pick?
To be honest, I'm probably more Dovetail than I am Seagrass.
I probably...
I don't know if I would change that today or not.
Man.
But.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like I love Dovetail for what it is, but Seagrass is just so friggin' unique. There's something about Seagrass. Yeah.
Soda too, man. It's fine.
Yeah. Dovetail is too grapey, says Wigmaster. Yeah, I think that's a thing. They got those port pipes in it that they use. So question, is MGP just better juice for finishing, or is there just way more out there, less non to compare it to? I don't think, I think MGP, I think finishing has nothing to do with it, AW. I think people buy MGP barrels that are younger, and to help sell it, they throw it in a finishing barrel. I don't think that makes it being able to finish better than others, because I've had some really amazing just straight MGP that has nothing, to do, that has no sort of finish, nothing done to it. That's amazing. I don't think that's the case at all. I think when you see a bunch of finishing MGPs, it's just NDPs trying to do different things with what they have instead of just rolling out. I mean, if you have 100 barrels of MGP and all you're doing is rolling out regular MGP at the same age constantly, people are going to get bored of your brand. You have to do something, so why not finish it? I don't think it makes it necessarily better to finish with, but I will say this. I think the high ride mash bill that MGP has, I'd rather have that in a finish than like a Buffalo Trace or Elijah Craig in a finish, because then it just gets too overly sweet. I always think it needs rye to balance out those finishing notes when you can.
And to be honest, I think too, something you just mentioned, the fact that they're essentially low rye is already pretty high, and then their high rye is even higher. Yeah, exactly. It does. I also don't want to be one that says that finishing is like the most thing to be done with it, but it makes a better platform than most whiskeys for blending, because it won't just lean so heavy. Like there are a lot of people now who are blending with the 99.1. Errol was one who used a lot of the 99.1, and there are some of them that I like, but then there's others where you're like, where is literally anything to contract or to contrast the fact that it's just corn sweetness? And there's not a lot there, so you have that nice rye in the middle that will give a good get some structure to it.
WD Hare says, totally off subject. I pulled out Game Over again tonight for the first time in a bit. This pick is unbelievably fire. Okay, glad you're enjoying the pick, man. Yes, make sure you check out Abandoned Bourbon. Man, we're already at past 11 o'clock. This was a really cool conversation. Brian, tell everybody where to find you if they haven't found you yet.
Absolutely. So I'm Abandoned Bourbon on YouTube. I'm Abandoned Bourbon on Instagram. That's where I am most of the time. And then I do a lot of content stuff over on Sealbox channel. So I think that's Drink Sealbox. Or again, so kind of going back to the Patreon thing too. I do if you're not into Sealbox, totally understand. Some people don't buy from there, but we do a lot of NDP crap stuff, and I'm pumping out a lot of those newsletters, doing a lot of those picks. So you'll see a lot of content and picks from me and a lot of communication about products there as well. So if I'm not even saying buy something, but if you even jump on the email list, we do email a lot because we have a lot of products that come in and out. And if we want people to get them, you just kind of have to be in the know. So you would hear from me a lot if you jumped on the subscription list there at Sealbox. And then again, we have tons of stuff. So if you want picks that I do, just message me about what's coming up because I'm doing picks all the time.
Yeah, and obviously, guys, if you haven't checked out Brian's actual YouTube channel yet, please do. He does great reviews, has a great palate. I generally agree with most of what he says, so I like him. But if you have another channel you're looking for with some really solid reviews and some really good tasting notes to help guide you, then definitely check out Brian and what he's doing. Really quick, Brian, before I let you go, how do you make your ultimate peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Okay, so my mom was the cafeteria lady in the school I grew up in, and she would always make really good peanut butter and jellies, and so I follow suit. It's 2 bread. I used to have a 3rd slice. I don't anymore. It's 2 bread. It's a ton of
You used to make the old double decker, huh?
Double decker. It is a lot of peanut butter, creamy, and a lot of jelly. And as a secret, not all the time, but every once in a while, I'll put a little honey in there and mix it up as well. I try and give it all a nice big stir so it's kind of all evenly in there. And then
you're probably the 3rd person I think that has told me that they utilize honey in theirs as well. But what type of bread we talking here? Just white bread?
So I'm usually a classic white bread guy.
Classic white bread, creamy peanut butter. What type of jelly? Grape, strawberry? Where are we going? Grape jelly.
Grape jelly. Yep.
Grape jelly, creamy peanut butter, white bread, and a little bit of honey when you're feeling.
As long as it's like a 1/2 inch thick in the middle, you've done it right.
And a little bit of honey if you're feeling crazy that day.
Just a little bit of honey.
All right, guys. So with that said, thank you for hanging out tonight. Again, I am off next week. I'm off the grid for a week for work. So I will try to get some content posted here next week and maybe by the end of this week, guys. But work has just been kicking my ass. That's why my apologies for the lack of content in the last week. It's just been really tough. I'm on a computer all day, and the last thing I want to do is go behind another computer again and edit. So once this week is over, things will get back a little bit to normal after next week. But I will be back on the 31st on Wednesday night for another live stream. And then the week after, August 7th, mark your calendars. I am scared, Brian. Nancy Fraley has sent me a blind challenge to do. And I don't know what the hell she sent, but I'm scared.
Be ready to be humbled. That's what you need to do.
I'm gonna be very humble. Nancy is sending me some stuff, and I don't know what to expect. But that live stream is happening August 7th. I can't
wait to watch that.
Oh my God, I cannot.
Grab my blanket and a flashlight and watch that one.
Oh God, I'm gonna need to therapy after that live stream. I think a little bit. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, so again, taking off next week, guys. Go check out Brian, subscribe to his channel, and I will see you in a couple weeks here on Wednesday night. So, again, Brian, thanks for hanging out. Love all of you. And as I always say, it's not about the whiskey. It's the people you share it with. Cheers, and I'll see you next time right here next week on the Master and Drum. And all you patrons, hang out. I'm going to be doing an after live stream. And if you still want to go watch some Whiskey Tube, go hang out with Women of Whiskeys right now. They're talking to JT Mellick tonight. Some amazing Louisiana rice whiskey. So cheers.